welcome to another episode of Motivational Sundays with Kevin and my good friend, Miss Marjorie Phoenix. For most of us in this country, we have questioned a little bit of everything. Mask on, mask off. The Olympics are coming to a close, and we have our questions regarding, should we compete? Should we not compete? Is this how we wear our hair? Or do I have a right when I stand on the podium to express myself because I see the world a little differently? We also, live in a society to where life challenges us every single day. You question the fact that when an 8-year-old boy loses his life in his battle to cancer, is he really in a better place? How do we deal with that? Was he a messenger of God? Or why this even happened? Muhammad Ali, going through history, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Based on what? The way that he looked at life or how he felt about life. He decided not to fight against people that had not done anything against him. And we stripped him of all of his titles, only to have him come back and be the greatest individual alive. Every day there's a book printed telling you 7 steps to this, 10 steps to that, going to motivate you, going to bring wealth to you. And how many of us have actually been motivated, or those 7 steps have led us to greatest wealth? So on Motivation Sundays, this is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. My best friend and co-host and co-founder of RMK Productions has joined us. It's just the two of us. Today's quote is another quote that was written on a page that came out of a conversation based on the situation at hand. And I want you to think about emotions, perceptions, interpretations. Not acknowledging any of those devalues the events to be real. Or does it? Marjorie, when I first put pen to paper, you and I had just become friends. There was a movement going on that confused the whole country. George Floyd had lost his life. We were picketing in peaceful protests, and people only saw what was reported on Fox News as the violence and the looting. When I gave my first presentation publicly as the interpretation of what people thought they were seeing, and what was actually happening, the way that I explained this was a husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend. The wife comes to the husband and she explains that she's a little salty about the way that he's been treating her. And his response is, I'm sorry that, this has happened, but, this is the way that I'm feeling or whatever. That's the perception of what she was trying to say. This is what I'm feeling. The interpretation is that he did not acknowledge it. So what happens that? So her peaceful protest turns into a public display of how she was going to react to that. And most people look at that as a non-peaceful protest when he's sleeping on the couch, or he didn't get dinner that night, or she's not talking, or could be the worst, she's holding personal affections towards him.
Yes.
When she repeats that this is wrong, this needs to be right, and again, he defends his position without listening, that's when the peaceful protest turns into throwing your clothes out the window, out to the curb, driving your keys down there. And that is the rioting and looting. So the first thing we got to understand is that when we have these conversations, and I'm learning this as an art, even with being partners with you and Raymond, is that I'm trying to master the art of listening. I had this conversation with my daughter about a guest that's coming on my show. And instead of me having an opinion or having something to say, I keep my mouth shut, I count to 5, I listen, I acknowledge, and I listen some more. So taking this quote and sharing it with our audience, even though you and I are going solo today, I know life has presented you with a lot of great opportunities, and you had to overcome. You're even the author of a book goes, "What the hell are you thinking?" And people are going
Who
to
the
read
hell do you
that.
think you are?
All right, what the hell were you thinking? See, interpretation, perception. So thank you for correcting me. So how does that land for you? Emotion, perceptions, interpretations, and not acknowledging the value of the events in the book.
Wow. Yeah, I love how you use that story of the husband and wife, really looking, and then also paralleling it with the George Floyd and uprising around that time. Looking at it, for me, and I always think, psychologically around these things as well, right? How all of that works together: emotions, interpretations, perception. Perception is huge.
Right,
Perception is huge. The emotions around an event or an experience, it drives that, right? It can skew it, right? But also there are the experiences that we've had that's a part of that, of the perceptions as well, and how we see things. Those are a big part of our biases. So just going back to the whole George Floyd incident, because I really like to talk from there from a social standpoint. I think that the problem with the emotions part is that people are letting that lead a lot. And people can say, well, there's a lot more hate and we need a lot more love. What we need is empathy, right? We do need empathy. We need this level of understanding where people actually want to know. But we're at this cusp right now in the country where I think that people are not leaning in. I love to say leaning in to sort of listen to one another and understand one another and challenge their perceptions about the way they see the world, the country. And this goes for both sides. And it's funny you said this because um, I had a conversation not today, a couple days ago with a friend that I haven't spoken to in like over 10 years. And we came together to talk about potentially collaborating on something. And they were talking to me about, working with this group in helping them understand diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And how they can have the conversation. And they were a little hesitant to have the conversation with this group because they just felt like everyone is so politically sensitive. And what I could hear from the emotion side from this friend was some anger, some real anger. And then what I also heard was their perception around how they thought equity and inclusion was being played out in the workplace, right? And now they were getting ready to interpret it, right? They wanted to show it in a way that's like, this is bad, this is wrong, sort of thing. So that was the interpretation they were trying to go for with all of this. And when we got to talking, I said to them that when you try to have these kinds of conversations, one of the things that you definitely got to do, and you said this, Kevin, is you have to listen. And you have to go with inside yourself and you have to be able to self-reflect and look at your own personal biases. And you have to question yourself. When you do start to feel these emotions, ask yourself, where's this really coming from? Right? And most of the time, they'll say these emotions do come from a sense of fear, whether it be anger or anxiety or whatever, right? So start to sort of question that and question your perception, because just because this has been your experience doesn't mean it's been everyone's experience. But here's the thing: you want to respect that person's experience, right? This is their experience. This is your experience. It may not be the same, but the thing about valuing that and acknowledging that is being able to listen to that, listen to them as they share their experience. And really, like I always say, just sort of lean in and just try to get that understanding. You know, Ray always says this all the time, you know, we can be in conversation, doesn't mean we have to agree, but in conversation, that is where you're talking about where you're acknowledging that person enough to hear them, right?
Right.
And you're showing them that you value what they have to say. So that's my sort of spin and take on it.
And looking at it that way is, you know, the key, at least for me, is the acknowledging of that. Because when you look at the situation, I had a lady when we were in Clubhouse from the UK, and I explained to her that on New Year's Eve, going into 2021, I was pulled over by a police officer, which I happened to be behind, had not done anything wrong. But his reason for pulling me over was because my headlights were flickering. Now, granted, I've got a brand new car. It's not supposed to happen like that. So I got out to see, well, why are my headlights flickering? He immediately put his hand on his holster and told me to get back in the car. I'm going, it's a natural reaction. You know, if there's a problem with your car, to want to see what it is. I am not a threat. This is New Year's Eve. I've not been drinking, whatever. But in my little town of Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and I'll call it out repeatedly, there has not been a year that I have not been pulled over without cause. And this officer happened to be the second time that I have had a confrontation with him. And I won't say confrontation, it's been a conversation. It's been one-sided because my side hadn't been heard. Based on his perception of who I was, my interpretation to why he pulled me over, and not acknowledging to give me the courtesy of the respect to tell me what I had done wrong, I have still yet to receive a traffic ticket based on any reason to pull me over. So in my mind, that I'm being pulled over while being in the right neighborhood, my home, by driving with black. But the one thing is, when you look at the conversation, and you've heard me say this before, education is not designed to make you comfortable. Education is designed to make you think. Acknowledging that this country has had a poor history of how they treated and how they provided opportunities for people that were different from what they think they are the founding fathers. And if they really acknowledge the founding fathers, we'll have an Indian president. Because, you know, you ask Christopher Columbus, how do you lay claim to a land that's already occupied? And you said you discovered it. Is basically get enough people to believe that what you're saying is true. And I don't have to elaborate on how many presidents we've had in office that basically have had that opinion. We talk about all the time. You know, we had a podcast on Storytime and Wine about the cancel culture. You know, we've had this conversation by being a Black-owned business, is that why do we have to have a title in saying that we're a Black-owned business? So when I explain to people that are different from us, it's because the opportunity to have this conversation has not been provided to us.
Yes.
And this is a conversation acknowledging the fact that we are just as successful and we provide opportunities the same way other people provide opportunities, but not acknowledging the fact that we can deliver an education at the same level of any Ivy League school, not acknowledging the fact that we can provide a product, create a product, or provide a service that's equal to some of the big companies, Coca-Cola, Amazon, Walmart, whatever, that we are not legitimate players. It's all based on the perception of the individual and the interpretation of the conversation we're having. I had this conversation regarding publishing a book and self-publishing a book. And my question was, what's the difference between ink on a white page and a book that was done by a publisher that takes 80% of your royalty versus the same ink on the same paper of someone that self-publishes, that created their own social media content, and they become a bestseller? And if 50 Shades of Grey haven't shown you that self-publishing can turn into a multi-million-dollar dream, who's the real author?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Listen, we have really great examples of that. But I want to go back to something you just mentioned about presidents. I mean, the day we would see a Native American president in this country. I mean, that would be amazing. That would take our country in such a direction. Listen, there will be some people that you think that they lost their stuff when Barack was president as a Black man, or to have a Black woman, but to put a Native American there, wow,
Yeah,
that's like taking it home.
you're exactly right. But I will say, it was told to me since I was a child that in my lifetime, nor in my children's lifetime, nor in my children's lifetime, we would never see a Black president.
Wow.
Holy,
Well,
I want to say holy shit, but this is Sunday, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to believe that anything's possible. The
yes,
day that we realize that we need to stop inviting our grandparents in order to run this country, it's a day that opportunity is going to open up for all. Because I
yeah,
believe young people see that equality is there for all. The interpretation of what politics is not for the wealthy. Politics was created for the people. And when they
that's right.
understand the people are not at where the oligarchy is,
Yes,
meaning the very rich, the people are in the numbers. And perception of where the numbers are versus perception of where the power is, that's where fear begins, because they're so afraid that
yes,
we are going to unite. That's the reason why they put words out there. That's the reason why the cancel culture is out there, is divide us. Once they have divided us based on our race, our economic status, our beliefs in social equality, our justice system, they will eventually pick us off little by little. It's like when you look at the fact that COVID, where did COVID hit? Didn't hit
mm,
the oligarchy, the very rich.
yes,
It hit the
right.
people that were hurting the most. Okay. If you look at when we shut down, how is it that we all struggled to pay our bills when the very rich were vacationing across the world and they had double digit return on their investment? At
Yes,
some point, acknowledging our experience and the perception and the events, we all have to ingest, swallow, and understand that what we see, what we think, and the way we're responding to it is real. We can't excuse it for our own beliefs.
yeah. And I think what you're saying too about the education around this, and you're so right. It's not meant to be comfortable. Learning something new, because learning challenges again those perceptions, right? It
Mhm.
challenges what you thought you knew. It pushes you, and I wish Ray was here for this conversation, but it pushes you to be a critical thinker, which we lack. Okay. Oh my God, we lack it. They do not really teach children that. So one of the things I noticed too, going back to this conversation that I was having with this friend, was the lack of knowledge, right? And really truly understanding what certain things meant and using terms, right? So I didn't have to say, this is my perception, this is my interpretation. And I did not let my emotions and what I was thinking at that time lead. I listened, right? And I could just hear from certain words, like the way the term racism was used. I could tell, okay, obviously you don't know what racism really means. When affirmative action is used and not understanding what affirmative action really is and what it's meant for. And so when we were talking about this, and she asked me, so what do you do so you don't have to feel like you're just a check off a list when you're applying for a job, right? She's like, wouldn't you rather be hired for your knowledge and skills and not just be this quota? I said, well, it really depends. And I said, but the part for that is that companies need to start throwing this wider net to reach out to more diverse people, and they don't do it. They throw out this net, let's just say, to only Ivy League schools. And then when all the candidates come back that are not Black, then they're like, oh, well, we didn't have any Black supply or anything. Well, did you throw any nets over by the HBCUs? Did you evaluate that even in the beginning stages, right? So just different things like that can be done, that it doesn't have to be based on affirmative action, but it's just about thinking about diversity and inclusion in a different sort of way, and understanding that. And I will say this and shout this from the rooftops. I believe that education in our history right now is one of the most important things at this particular moment, because if we lose that, if we lose the truth of history and we do not educate our young people and some of these adults walking around here, we are going to lose so much. Like when you and I are gone, Kevin, or our children are gone, like who's going to then know about the Rosa Parks, right? Who's going to know about the Malcolm X's and some of the other ones that aren't as much well known? Who's going to know about really what happened during slavery and the Civil War and the Jim Crow era and Reconstruction, and understanding and seeing the thread, not to educate people on history in a way to demonize, but you're educating people so that they can have a better understanding of what they are now seeing, right? And how that can change the way they are perceiving it.
You're exactly
right? Because they don't have enough knowledge to help them truly see, the truth of things, and then that changes interpretation going forward.
And the surprising thing is when you put it out that way, because a lot of people that are listening and that we're going to share this with, that don't look like us, that come from someplace different, they don't realize when you talk about the Rosa Parks, you talk about the Frederick Douglasses, you talk about the Malcolm X, you talk about, Dr. Martin Luther King. A lot of those people, there are people that were white Americans that were part of that movement that allowed, that train, that Underground Railroad to exist.
Yes.
And as much as we look at, and I say this all the time, our country was built on blood and bones, and we have to stop sacrificing our children in order to fight a war that's just strictly for profit. I don't care how you cover it up, but as much as you don't want to acknowledge the negative part of it, you can also celebrate there were some souls that were brave enough that had lost their life in order to fight to do right. And that's the part, even though you are not directly, and you say, well, this has nothing to do with me, as long as the blood runs through your veins, as long as your name has a connection to a past, you cannot move forward until you acknowledge the role, either positive or negative, that your ancestors played, and then acknowledge the fact that your silence and your lack of action is the reason why when people say that I don't see color, that's the reason why things don't get done. That statement was the fact of people that were too afraid to get involved, but they had an opinion that they disagreed with the masses that, something should be done, but because of retribution, they didn't get involved. And they had to live with that.
Yes.
The only way that we can heal is to understand that there's a wound that needs to be taken care of. The only way that we can move forward is that we can't begin until we understand where the end is going to begin.
Yes, that's so true. You got to look in the past, so that you can, move towards the future and see, and understand it to see what's happening now in the present. And that I used to hear people say that a lot. I don't see color. And what I realize is that there's a lot you don't see, right? Because when you don't see color, then you really don't see the structural racism. You don't see the systemic racism. You really don't see those things. And so you miss out on a lot. So, for me, the education part, which is what we are about here at RMK Productions is about giving you the right information, right? For you to be able to then interpret it. Now, you could still take that and you and I may interpret it differently. That's fine. But as long as you got the truth, you're not basing your perception, right? Or these emotions you feel off of a lie, basically. So, and when they talk about, they always have this thing about the angry Black, female or, angry Black males. Those emotions, listen, those emotions are coming from this place of frustration and having to deal with the truth of what we not only know in the past, but have experienced, what we see. So that emotion right there, it's coming from truth. That's where it's coming from for us. So
Yeah, we are faced today with probably more challenges of things that we have to make choices on in our everyday life than we've ever been before. We have to face and look at the fact that, we got a little reprieve from COVID. And because we let our guards down, now the numbers are going up. And it's going up in those states where, people says, I have the right not to get vaccinated. I have the right not to wear a mask. I have the right to gather with as many people as possible. I watched a video the other day that Roland Martin had, and I asked myself why. He videotaped a overweight white man that had already lost multiple people in his family to COVID because they chose not to wear a mask, and they gathered, at an event together, and he was taking his last breath. It was shocking. Sometimes you have to have it in your face. But I also, watched a country that could divide it by a 24-year-old girl that had celebrated the fact that she was a US citizen, never said I was a Black Olympian. She celebrated the fact that she represented her country. And then when she had publicly came out and basically said that I'm not dealing with this well, the country got divided. Instead of supporting a child, they decided, when your deputy, what's it, a general attorney or whatever in Texas basically says she's embarrassment to her country. 6 years ago, was she an embarrassment when she was, winning
No.
all the awards, carrying the flag around?
No.
Is she an embarrassment to this country when
No.
she took a step down and 3 out of 4 of her teammates won gold medals? Her team won a silver, which they probably wouldn't have got if she had participated hurt. When you look at the perspective and interpretation of what she did, I said this last week, she needed a hero. I think this country needs to embrace her. I think the people that don't have a conversation should sit back and listen and learn and watch. She's done more for this country as a representative on a global platform than most of us sitting earshot away from this interview. And when we talk about motivation happens every single day. We just happen to pick Sunday because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are crowded with a lot of other people that's quoting people, but they're not having a conversation how the words land on a page. And we all know that, including myself, every quote that we ever had, everything that we claim, that if you say that Simon Sinek quoted this, all these quotes come from the Bible. We're not originators of anything. We are part of the R&D department, rip off and duplicate daily. And we don't realize that. We have to embrace the truth. Okay?
Yes.
We have to embrace the fact. We have to embrace the conversation you have right now, or experiences that you're sharing in the same space. It's reality. And we have to step aside and pull ourselves aside and look at it and says, does our actions support the conversation we have, or our actions are suppressing the reality of someone else that's trying to get their point across to you, saying this is what life happens to be. We should end the situations where there should never be a George Floyd. We should end the situations whereas, we hold back funds from people that can't pay their rent when the government's already allowed that, and allow people to be evicted from their homes. All right. We should eliminate those conversations to whereas I cannot get a loan to start a business when I have got a product that will change the world. There was a guy that invented blood plasma, Dr. Charles Drew, that has saved millions of lives, but no one knows that he died needing the same transfusion as a black man that he had created that
Mhm.
now are saving lives. Just think about it. We lost a great educator based on the bias or the color of his skin. So with that said, we're going to wrap this up, allow you to get on with your Sunday, but we want you to think about the conversations we have, and there's many layers to this. We meet every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is Kevin and Friends. This is a production of RMK Productions, 10 United, the podcast network. You can reach us on, I'm going to let Marjorie do this, so I don't have to look at my notes. How do you do it?
Yes, you can definitely go to our website at rmkproductions.net, and please go and subscribe and share this from our YouTube channel as well, RMK Productions and Network. And we look forward to seeing you again next Sunday, right, Kevin?
Yes, yes. And as my grandfather always says, all right, and this is the reason why, my personal commitment and my love and affection to Marjorie Phoenix and Raymond Porch, my brother, my sister, when he says you get to a position that you can help someone else, it is your duty. Reach one, teach one, fade to black.